I expect the 401k to disappear in our lifetimes. That's my wild, crazy prediction.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point Podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the Freedom Point. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I've got another amazing guest, as I always do. I've got Mark Willis. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. For my listening audience, Mark Willis is a financial planner. He's the founder of Lake Growth Financial Services in Chicago. And Mark has spent the last over a decade helping clients take control of their financial futures with innovative, tax-efficient strategies. All that being said, Mark, maybe you can kind of give our listeners a little bit more information about, your background, what you're focused on today, et cetera.
It's been a privilege and an honor to work with people who want to grow their wealth alongside or outside of Wall Street and their portfolio, making a more dynamic, interdependent, and integrated financial plan. But I certainly didn't grow up that way. I was not intending to be a financial planner, but out of my own desperation to learn about how money works, graduating with 6 figures of student loan debt, and no plan to pay it off in the midst of the Great Recession, it got me slapped upside the head to really understand how to make money work for me rather than the other way around. I know that's a big part of what your work is in this podcast is on passive income. So working with my own financial life caused my wife and I to really kind of, it felt like we were blind beggars who'd found this delicious meal, and we wanted as many people to find it as possible. So we just started sharing it with our friends, and ideas came to mind, and we ended up starting our business in 2012. I guess, wow, 13 years ago now. And I stumbled through that process, worked on getting my certified financial planner designation, and I did that out of an interest, one, to serve my clients better, which is the highest, personal financial planning designation you can get, but also because I personally wanted to really know that I knew that what I was doing was the right thing for my clients, but also for my own financial life too. I did not want more myths pushed on me by biased radio infotainers, if you know what I mean. So that really was what got me interested in the financial world. And now we work with business owners, real estate investors, syndication managers, and more to help build real wealth and to help them achieve financial independence, certainty, and control. We like to call it the X factor, ECS, efficiency, control, and safety. If you have that in your portfolio, then almost everything is possible.
Well, I'd love for you to unpack that last comment a little bit more as we go along here, but I can certainly resonate, with your rage against the media statement. I also love that you're focused outside of Wall Street. Okay. Oftentimes, investors only know what their financial advisor tells them, what their friend Brad tells them, what their parents tell them, college professors, the media, et cetera, right? So I know that you're laser focused, as am I, in helping direct people to investments that are not directly correlated to Wall Street investments. With that said, Mark, what is the design of the ideal financial strategy, and what key principles or elements would that ideal, financial strategy consist of?
Well, most financial advisors are coming out of a legacy model and coming out of a context in which we all became a nation of investors. So, and rightfully so. If you look at the stock market from the beginnings, the 150 years ago, let's say, up through 1980, it's mostly just flat, flat, flat until we get to about 1980, and there's this rocket ship rise up until about the year 2000. I call this the Roaring 20. colleague of mine gave me that. And it really is true because the boomers, in many ways, were coming of age. There was the computer revolution. There was just a lot of factors that went into this surge, and it averaged a 12% per year return over 20 years. So if you are a financial advisor still in your working years, you probably cut your teeth in those years. You started your practice and whatever, and all you ever knew was everyone should be a speculator, everyone should be an investor, but it hasn't always been that way, has it? So the stock market is a very recent phenomenon for the typical person. It was really meant for the very wealthy, to put a little bit of their portfolio into and speculate mostly. And up until 1974, when we passed ERISA, and then 1981, when we started doing 401ks. And it's at that moment, the 401k, which, if you think about that for a minute, Jeremy, isn't that weird? The 401k is so young, 1981. I mean, if it was a human and it followed its own rules, it couldn't even access its own money. It's not even old enough to retire yet, the 401k. And yet it's this grand experiment that we've all been subjected to. And we are led to believe that we will always and forever have that 20-year roaring 20, that moment in which the stock market really surged up. But if you really look at the math from the year 2000 till now, the real investor returns have been closer to 4%, not 12. Now, that's before taxes are factored in. If you have a 401k or a capital brokerage account, capital gains brokerage account, you're going to be less than 4%. And this is according to third-party research firm DALBAR, DALBAR. If folks want to look that up, their annual investor behavior study comes out, and the results are jaw-dropping. Are you willing to subject yourself to the sleepless nights, the humiliation at the cocktail party, all for 4% or less, if taxes are included, in your stock accounts? My thought is, if I was an alien landing on this planet for the first time and just looking at my options for what do I want my money doing for me, and I saw stock market as something that was riddled with fees, highly volatile, no control or access, I would not find that to be my primary place where I kept my important money, the money I cannot afford to lose. Sure, invest money you can afford to lose, even speculate with it, but not the money I cannot afford to lose. There should be better and more reasonable alternatives that do not take unnecessary risk with that money. And I don't have to sacrifice gains, rate of return, tax efficiency just to be able to do what I want with my own money. I shouldn't have to anyway. And there are financially and thankfully, there are a number of different tools and resources you can put your money into. So back to your question, the ideal financial portfolio. Everyone's different, of course, so I got to have the CFP answer. It depends. But I honestly love some of the things that you say on your podcast that you've mentioned in terms of real estate syndication deals and more. I honestly think that everyone should know that real estate has been around since the pyramids as an asset class. So that's a time tested, real strategy. There's something called the Lindy effect in the world. This is just a phenomenon called the Lindy effect. And it's essentially the longer something has existed, the more likely it is to exist. So human beings, unfortunately, don't have this. The longer we're around, the less likely we are to exist. But let's say it's why I could predict and say that the chair is going to outlast the iPhone. The chair has been around for far longer. It's going to outlast these newfangled technologies that we all know today. The book will outlast the Kindle. These sorts of ideas, right? So look to this in your financial life too. The assets that have predated other assets typically last longer. So let's look at why is real estate, why are syndications so valuable? I'll throw an idea out and then I'll finally hush and pass the ball back to you. Here's why I think real estate and other similar assets that don't relate to real estate at first are all going to become more and more important as we enter into this brave new world. And here it is. Why is a real estate deal important? Why is a syndication deal valuable? Is it because I can put my hand on the property? Is it because I can, improve the asset? Is there a tax advantage? Is there the guaranteed income, the stream of income that can sometimes come from rentals or syndications? Those are good, but the real reason why syndications and other like assets are helpful are, and here it is, it's a contract. It's a contract. Because we live in a civilization that honors the contract, thank God, we live in a world and a civilization that honors the relationship between human beings called a contract. We can envision a brighter future with that syndication deal. If I don't have a contract on that rental property down the street as a landlord, I don't have rights to to that property. All I have is shotgun rights at that point, right? It's the squatter's rights at that point. Without the contract, the asset is worthless. So what I look for as a CFP is where can I find the contract baked in to whatever it is that I want to invest into, and I spread that into multiple asset classes, all developed into the contract. If I don't have a contract in my portfolio, all I have is paper profits going up and down and up and down. But when I have a contract, and as long as we have civilization, I know that I've got some certainty.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate you with your shameless plug on me. I also appreciate you handing the baton back. However, I think my listeners would probably glean more from having you continue to talk. That said, I would love to get your perspective on something. So I know that the 401k is only 43 years old, maybe 44 years old, somewhere in that time horizon. But I also know that there's a number of states now that are passing laws related to employers requiring that they provide their employee base with access to a qualified retirement plan. This is new. I believe it started out on the West Coast and it's kind of been spilling into other states, as we go forward. I'd love to know what your perspective on that is overall, and then how you feel as though that might influence prices or valuations in people's retirement plans.
Well, there's upward and downward pressure for sure. Now, first of all, it's a great deal if you're the financial firm that shook the hand of the governor of that state and got the default option to get money just poured into your financial firm or operation. And that happened in the state I live in, and it's certainly, I think, going to be investigated at some point. Well, why was that the default financial firm as opposed to somebody else? Sounds like a sweetheart deal to me. But there's going to be upward pressure on prices because more people are going to have to be, sort of just thrown into the stock market. I think irresponsibly so. Again, when you think about what does your money do for you when you put it into the stock market, is that aligned with the typical, small business with 5 employees, let's say? Sometimes yes, but when I look at the portfolio of the average American, 90% of their portfolio is tied up in their, if they have any savings or anything at all, 90% of it is tied up in their home equity and it's tied up in their qualified retirement account that they can't touch. So where is their emergency fund? How do they cover that job loss or that medical expense or that roof that just had, a leak last time it rained, or their kids' college? Where are they getting the money there? Where it's coming from credit cards, it's coming from personal loans. This is why people are getting 18% credit cards and only getting 4% or whatever on their 401k. Tell me why that makes sense. And by the way, when you ask them, where do you think taxes are going in this country? And you're putting your money in a tax deferred retirement plan. They all say, well, Mark, I think taxes are probably going to go up over my lifetime. Why do you ask? And I say, it's in a tax deferred retirement plan. What does that word deferred mean? And I'm being as gentle and as hopefully compassionate as I can, but I'm helping them think for themselves. There's a quote that says, what is it? 80% of people, what's the quote? Oh, here it is. 10% of people think, 10%. Another 10% think that they think, and the other 80% would rather die than think. So my hope and my prayer is that I work with people who are already wanting to think, if not anything else, and I'm trying my best to think. It's a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of calories, but when you start to think about why am I doing what I'm doing, I've got my money. I have a choice when I've got $1 in my pocket to put it in a tax deferred retirement account, and I also think that taxes are going up in the future. That makes no sense. There's an irrationality to it. And I get it. We're weird human beings. I do all sorts of irrational things. I want a six pack of abs. I also love ice cream. So I understand irrationality and I'm hopefully patient with folks. But as we go forward, continuously ask yourself, is what I'm doing with my money aligning with my belief about reality? Because the truth is, reality is the undefeated champion of all time. And if you want to fight reality, you're going to be on the wrong end of that fight. So discover for yourself what is the truth about money and what do I truly want my money doing for me? And that's where we can get a really good conversation started. So back to your question, I think it's going to be more problematic. It's like buying your retirement at the mall with these, default retirement accounts. What does that mean? That means an underperforming, overly expensive journey to retirement that will lend people the belief that they are preparing for their future, but unfortunately, it's going to underwhelm and underdeliver.
I'm Zach Captainstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
I appreciate that response, Mark. I'd also like to get your perspective on what I call the inflation monster. Okay. You've been a financial planner since 2012. So you've gone through periods of low inflation, and we've all gone through the last 4 to 5 year period where our purchasing power, in some cases, has been cut in half, right? The value of a dollar has gone down, depending upon who you ask, anywhere from 20 to 25% in just a very short 4 to 5 year period. So, given the fact that our wealth building strategy is constantly being deteriorated as a direct result of a high inflationary environment, what's the prudent approach for the average investor as it relates to, what that balanced portfolio should look like, going forward?
Well, no, okay. So, what is inflation? We have to go back to that. Uh, the true definition of inflation is the increase of the money supply, not prices going up, but the increase of the money supply. And so, again, figure out who is to blame, and you can figure out who is the one increasing, whom is, or should we apply this blame? And I would say, look to the people who are increasing the supply of money. And it's actually been a tremendous increase in the dollars sloshing around in our bank accounts. But our population has not grown. Since 1990, we've only had like a 25% inflation, people inflation, numbers, people, Americans, you might say. But there's been a 10x increase in our dollars and the money floating around out there. And that alone should explain a lot of the reason why the price of eggs is going up and the price of lumber and that sort of thing. But to your question, man, I'd say, the only thing we can do is increase our own money supply. And there's all kinds of incredibly creative ways to do that. Again, keep listening to Jeremy's podcast for, I think, some smart ideas on how to do that. But increase your own money supply, increase the value you have in the marketplace. That is the instant answer. Give yourself a pay raise through becoming more valuable in the marketplace. You did some very brave things over the last 13 years as you've been able to transition from your full-time position. You could have just kicked it, phoned it in, and just rode the wave. But no matter our income level, no matter our success, everyone gets hit with inflation. But it most oftentimes is most painful for folks at the bottom end of the economic spectrum. So you must find ways to increase your own money supply and your income capacity. So money supply means liquid, available buckets of cash that earn a reasonable inflation protected rate of return. Now, where is that? Is it checking account, savings account, money market accounts, CDs? I don't think so. Those are really where most people keep the bulk of their liquid buckets of money, if they have any at all. Some people have looked at money market accounts and CDs, but remember, those are taxable. So your 4% CD or 5% CD or whatever you may have found in the last year or so is really maybe only 2.5 or 3% once you factor in the taxes due on the returns. What I would look for is a inflation protected, meaning it grows alongside and tracks with inflation, but a non-taxable on an annual basis asset class. Here's just one, for example, whole life insurance. If you've designed a whole life insurance policy to spec, not as a death benefit primary tool, although it does have that, but as a cash savings alternative asset, if you will, then you can use that whole life insurance as a substitute for liquid savings and insurance protection at the same time. So I'll give you a couple examples. If you pour money into a properly designed, I'll call it a bank on yourself designed whole life policy, it's going to have 40 times, somewhere between 8 and 40 times as much cash value as old fashioned whole life insurance would have. It'll grow at a reasonable beating inflation rate over time. There are no taxes due to access the money or to let it just sit there and grow. I mean, these are incredible features. And it most importantly is a good reminder that we should be aligning our desire with assets that reflect our desire. So again, I call it what you want. If you've got a bias against whole life insurance, call it the Superman money bucket or call it a wet sponge. I don't care what you call it, as long as it does what you need it to do for you. That's the key. And as a certified financial planner, I'm less concerned about your bias or your experience. I want to give you the very best plan and have a dialogue with you about function and verbs and adjectives, and less so about what a radio host might say about the name of the product. This is just some quick ideas. There are others as well, Jeremy, but any feedback or ideas on what we've shared so far?
No, but I really appreciate, and I think I heard your tagline in there, bank on yourself, right? So I would love for you to expand a little bit more on that and talk about how, how can bank on yourself, right? How can it help in other areas of your life? For example, paying for college, investing in real estate, or making other large purchases.
Yeah, I'll share my own story and then a couple other stories. So, my wife and I discovered this strategy of Bank on Yourself, which again is using a dividend paying whole life insurance policy designed for maximum cash accumulation. And we used it to pay off all of our student loan debts that we were really struggling under. We used it also to purchase vehicles. We've used it for some home purchases of real estate investments. We've used it for syndication deals as well. And the power of using that particular asset alongside the real estate. And not all whole life insurance does this. It must be bank on yourself designed. We can get into that if you want to. But if it's designed properly, the policy is used as almost collateral. It is collateral when you access it via the policy loan, which are guaranteed in the contract. There's that word again. Because it's an insurance contract, we have the right to borrow against our cash value and put it to work anywhere we want to put it, even syndication deals. So when I borrow from against my policy and put it toward an investment, let's say with Jeremy and his team, the policy will continue to grow and earn interest even on the capital I borrowed. And I've put the money over in Jeremy's fund to be able to get the kind of yield that we want to get from him. So now our money is, in essence, doing two things at once. It's continuing to get that productive, safe, even there's guarantees baked into that return in our policy. And also, the syndication might be able to get us, you fill in the blank here, Jeremy, but you can get the picture, guys. It increases your overall return without any additional market risk. So I don't see anything else in the financial universe that lets me do all that. Let me just list them off: paying off our debts, purchasing vehicles. We've had clients use it for medical emergencies. We've had folks send their kids to college. By the way, if the policies are in your portfolio, they do not count against you when your kids go to apply for financial aid. Um, this is an amazing tool, and it's predating, back to the Lindy effect, it predates the 401k by hundreds of years. the longer something's been around, the more likely it is to exist. I expect the 401k to disappear in our lifetimes. That's my wild, crazy prediction. Now, folks might still have a few accounts from decades ago, but I don't expect employers to be offering 401ks even by the time you and I might retire.
That's why that's wild for you to make that prediction, and I don't disagree with you. The question is really going to become a matter of timing and how quickly that's going to happen. So appreciate your perspective there, and all of
Well,
this.
you know what they say, Niels Bohr says prediction is very difficult, especially when it involves the future. So I'll give it my best.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, my kind of next question is really, all of this makes sense, right? But can you speak to the mind? And when I say speak to the mind, what type of, all the information's out there. I can get educated on the benefits of whole term life, policy investing and kind of that infinite banking strategy. But it really comes down to action. And usually the action isn't there until I've had a mindset shift. So, what does that kind of mindset shift typically look like? Maybe you can give us an example in your own life or in the life of one of the clients that you've served in kind of getting them over that mindset block of I've always done things this way and now I'm ready to take action steps.
Yeah, it really, for me, was an action step of just grabbing a legal pad of paper and writing with my wife. We wrote down, what do we want our money doing for us? And then we made a long part of my CFP journey was finding what is the hundreds of different places we have options to put our money. Every asset class, you add it up, it's almost 500 different asset classes out there. Real estate's just one of those, right? So, and then creating almost a matrix. I've got my 13 different things I want my money doing for me. I want guaranteed results. I want predictability in accessing my money, liquidity, that is. I want tax advantages. I want a tax free income in retirement. I want to leave a legacy. I want collateralization opportunities without having to kiss the ring of a banker. I want it to be private and outside of the court system. If I ever, God forbid, got sued by a renter or something like that, or someone slips on the banana peel outside my apartment building, I want to be able to keep it outside of probate if I should pass away, and I don't want to have to going through the courts just to get it to the people I love. I want it to be able to avoid certain income formulas for college. The list goes on, and you start first again with the adjectives and the functions. Pay less attention to nouns at this point in the activity, the thinking activity. Then just start researching. I mean, you can certainly do what I did and got my CFP to find all this out. You can also talk to a bank on yourself professional. And I'll just mention, if you're like me, you're going to find all sorts of stuff on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all this stuff. Be aware that there are 400,000 life insurance agents that would love to sell you one of these things. And if they did it right for them, wrong for you, they'd get a huge commission out of the deal. So it's very important you work with someone who is certified and authorized by Bank on Yourself. That is the only nomenclature in the industry that has any kind of protection for the consumer. It's sort of the CFP for this part of the industry. So make sure, whether you work with me, I'm happy to work with folks, or with one of my colleagues, make sure they are Bank on Yourself authorized as a professional. There's only about 200 that have gone through and met that certification qualification, but it's sort of the USDA organic, you might say, in this industry. There's a lot of infinite this and family wealth banking that and income multiplier, cash flow. There's lots of nicknames out there. The only one that really meets my criteria, really any criteria at all, is the Bank on Yourself system. So with that, I think the most important thing you can do is just begin with the end in mind. What do you want your money doing for you? Put that into place. And then I totally agree, Jeremy. We can spin our wheels in the snow and it just digs us down deeper, or we can apply a little traction and action to move our car forward, move our vehicle forward. So try something out, do something that is big enough for you to pay attention to, but small enough that if it fails you, it's not a complete disaster. So do something that's going to be that size, right? Reach out to somebody, set up a policy if you feel like that's helpful. We would have a financial analysis. We would follow the fiduciary steps of the financial planning process of having a high level strategic conversation with you to listen to your goals. Maybe this tool is not even the right fit and we go with an IRA instead. Just comes down to what each person needs. But the whole point of this is start with where you're at today. What do you need your money doing for you? Build a plan with a professional you can trust, and then take action in a way that you feel like would challenge you, but wouldn't, leave you burdened at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the most prudent advice there is actually taking action on what you learn. So I appreciate you, ending with that. Would love to know now, Mark, what's on your bucket list, either personally or professionally, as we move throughout 2025 and beyond?
Well, it gets me goosebumps just thinking about what if just 10% of America had this strategy at the core of their portfolio. I don't know what percentage have 401ks. I guess we could probably find that pretty easy. But what if just 10% also had a bank on yourself designed policy that they used for all of life's needs, whatever their cash needs were? Maybe it's so small they can really only use it for the next, microwave oven they need to buy, I guess. Or maybe it's big enough where they could be doing multiple syndication deals. We've even had a syndication management team implement this for purchasing and helping to raise capital for. And eventually they'll be able to do all this self in-house without the need of raising other capital if they choose to. So you can start small, grow from there. And that's, I'd say, the biggest and best thing you can do is, again, like you said, just take action and do something that you can feel like when you look in the rearview mirror, you can be proud of.
Mark, what's a couple of different ways that our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
We've got a YouTube, we've got an audio podcast, Not Your Average Financial Podcast. You can find us anywhere that you're listening to this show or watching this show. But I would say the number one thing is just go to our website, which is kickstartwithmark.com. Right there, you'll find the links to everywhere I'm at all over the web. Me and my team are ready at kickstartwithmark.com to have a 15-minute phone strategy session with you. It's a great, pain-free, cost-free way to take action, like Jeremy was saying. So go to kickstartwithmark.com.
That's great. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes for the episode. Mark, you've brought a tremendous amount of value to our listening audience, so thank you.
Thank you.
And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into another episode of The Freedom Point. I look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.